electronic media. Okay. Dr. Fuller, Stan Corey is asking, if children begin to, or people begin to have responsibility and control over their learning, what's going to happen in terms of the custodial responsibility of the schools? Be to have custody of their children during the daylight hours. What will happen in this new world of video access where people have control over their own learning?
We've got to get over altogether the difference between babysitting so the parents can do something else and the idea of a school. So there's also a beautiful social experience. And social experience is fine at school, where you learn to get on with other kids. But what we call really child learning is done absolutely by that individual, and all alone. They do their very best in exploring out in the woods all by themselves or in their room all by themselves. Every little child glues onto the television. And the parents say, we don't know what to do about it. Well, the point is that the parents are really almost voiceless today, and junk keeps continually coming over that television to the kids. The point is they glue on, and the minute you let them have the information they want, where they can really dial for the information they want coming over the television, they're going to do that there on their own. So we have to give up the idea of using television and how do you make money. We're going to have to say, how do you make sense? How do we really, are we going to stay on our planet? And we're not going to stay on this planet. If we just want to make money, just want to do things selfishly, locally, we're all through. It has to be everybody and nobody. So this medium is going to have to be freed up. But the point is the kids are already making the connection. So if you want to have babysitting, all right, let the kids come to a place where they have a nice social experience, but let them have the television right there. You don't have to have any teachers and the kids, but let the right program come over those televisions. Then the kids are just going to freeze onto themselves, and particularly when they can dial, and one is interested in the skiing, and one of them is interested in sailplaning, and another one is interested in how the little seed opens up, and another one's interested in how a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, and so forth. All those things they'll be able to get independently, not each having to listen to something they're not interested in when they're not interested. You can't do any group teaching. Learning has to be done entirely by that individual, and to say the social experience and the babysitting must consider absolutely separate functions.
This kind of service seems to pull out the walls between every situation, so that the classroom can literally share the environment, and anybody in the environment can be visited. You could drop in on the stock exchange, talk to the buyers and sellers on the floor. You could drop in on the weatherman.
The Irvine cable TV facilities have been designed and developed with two-way capability. In other words, this means that the cable TV network, which extends throughout the entire community, allows a signal to originate from any remote point and be transmitted upstream, and then be instantaneously relayed to all the cable users, whether it be the homes or the classrooms. We can do this utilizing two channels, and therefore allow a face-to-face dialogue or discussion to take place between two or more points. The other participants in a given activity will be able to listen in, and when they are called upon by the leader, will take turns coming on, raising questions, making points, going off, and then allowing the next location to come on. The design of the system utilizes very simple and inexpensive equipment, which is portable enough to be moved right into the classroom where the teachers and students use it in their most familiar environment. We also encourage community members to come in and use this in the evenings for public debate or community forums. As in this case, guests can come into the community and dialogue or interact with people throughout the entire city of Irvine from remote sites, perhaps 10 to 12 miles apart.
I mentioned legislative hearings. There will be a hearing, for example, on lowering the drinking age. That might be of great interest to students. There are questions about air pollution and jobs and various other serious questions affecting the state, and also just the mechanics of how it all works.
And there could be, if the tours were designed well, immediate on-site research of what's going on in government, what's going on in business, what's going on in newspapers, labor unions, the whole works could be observed through this mechanism if we can get somebody to organize it. So I'm not sure how we do that, but I turning it over to you, Paul. How do we do that?
That's a good question. Okay, if you guys are through, why don't we go on to UCI, okay?
I wondered just for a moment, could I have a follow-up question on that? Governor Brown, you mentioned the impact that it might have on the learning process for students to be able to drop in on various decision-making processes in government, for example. What do you suppose the impact would be on that decision-making process were individuals around the community, including students, able to drop in on that process? Do you think it would change? Do you think it would be more open, less open?
I think a little bit of both. In one sense, if everything is on television, people are going to be more careful about what they say. But on the other hand, to the extent that you can speed up the communication, you do create more information and more knowledge and more awareness, more feedback on both the part of the students, the viewers, and on the part of government leaders. So I think it basically would be a learning tool. It speeds up information. After all, what people now know with tape recorders, that almost anything that is said is put down somewhere, but it just may take a few weeks or a few months to get it into print or to get it broadcast or to get it spread around. And so all television would do would be to speed up that process.
Just as we have used telecommunications technology to reach beyond the classroom and extend into the community to create a much larger learning environment, it is our conviction that we may utilize the same approach to interconnect cities across the country via satellite. To this end, the Irvine Unified School District organized the Irvine Satellite Conference, which brought together people from all over the nation to sit down and explore and discuss this potential. Representatives were invited from satellite industry, educational institutions, scientists, communications theorists, elected officials, governmental representatives, and businessmen came together here in Irvine to look at this system which we have created, and most important, to use the system in a real hands-on experience to learn from one another. Superintendent Stan Corey hosted the conference.
It's a great pleasure to greet so many distinguished guests. I believe that we've been successful in gathering the most eminent of those who are interested in the topic that we believe we share, and that's the humanistic applications of the emerging technology to bring people closer together. We believe that there are a number of very important goals to be served by such a get-together. Not the least of these is the long-range determination of what the ultimate application of the emerging technology will be. We've had a 4-year experience now in Irvine in exploring the possibilities of using video for interaction rather than for the receipt of information. This has emerged out of the leadership of Professor Kataoka, who you'll hear from in a moment, the cooperation of the Irvine Company and Community Cablevision, and has enabled us to explore some of the ideas that you will hear about later in the conference from McLuhan, Buckminster Fuller, regarding the need for the learner to control his own learning and his ability to contribute substantially to his own learning and to the learning of others. And in this process, we have been able to adapt relatively low-cost technology to development of a system which very functionally interconnects all of our schools and gives the power and the option to any and each to enter voluntarily into dialogue, into sharing of information, into to learning experience with a larger community that would not be physically possible were it not for this means. The power of this interchange is yet to be established on a research basis. To this point, we have very strong feelings that some interesting phenomena are emerging in terms of the leveling effect of the interchange and interactive video between age. We find that it brings people of considerable cultural diversity together very quickly. Many of the aspects of physical proximity that cause sparring and maneuvering and a long period of adjustment and acclimatization are greatly reduced. Our hope is that we can experimentally verify that this means of interactive communication can enhance education, can enhance human understanding, can facilitate the making of decisions.
Guest speaker, Marshall McLuhan.
One of the possible uses of our present media would be for something I call organized ignorance. If you ask people, a great expert of some sort, what are the top problems in your world that remain absolutely unsolvable? Just too much for you. Suppose he's a cancer research specialist. Just tell me what the top problem is in your world, and if he then were to present to you the stages by which he had reached this impasse, this hopeless, opaque, impenetrable world of ignorance, this would present to a standby, some person outside his problem, a completely different vision from the one he has. Now, if you put his little confession of ignorance with its complete origin and account of how he got to that ignorance, using all his knowledge in order to become that ignorant, if you presented that on TV to the world, there's always one person who knows the answer instantly, who would simply say, where's the problem? Why doesn't he do this and this? Now, historically, all the greatest inventions of mankind have been by nobodies, and even by children. For example, one of the greatest inventions that man ever made is called the cybernetic device of the governor on a steam engine. And it was discovered by a 7-year-old child who had the job of pulling with a string, pulling the steam cock on the steam engine to let the steam out every time the wheel went around, the driving wheel. And the kid wanted to play marbles, so he tied the string to the driving wheel and invented the governor without even noticing. Now, the inventor of the steam engine couldn't possibly have done that. It was impossible. He knew such a thing was impossible. So he didn't bother to do it. But now, all the big discoveries in the world take place more or less unconsciously when somebody isn't looking. But if you put these big problems on the air, instead of putting people's knowledge on the air, put their ignorance on the air, then ordinary children, and well, remember Robert Oppenheimer used to say, there are kids playing on the street here who can solve some of my toughest problems because they have ways of perception that I lost years ago. The trouble with the scientist, the mature scientist, is that he has his patterns of perception have become highly specialized and lopsided. They're not holistic anymore. For example, the hemisphere surgeons who made those charts do not know that that the left one is visual and that the right one is acoustic. They're unaware of the nature of visual space and unaware of the nature of acoustic space. So are the psychologists. They don't understand those factors. They're so specialized that those rather comprehensive factors are beyond them. But organized ignorance is something in which the kind of interactive TV that we had this morning is ideally suited to exploit. One of the big problems in organized ignorance is when somebody does make the breakthrough, how do you find out who it is that made the breakthrough and what it was? How do you retrieve the answer and get it back to the broadcasting point? Because you've got to go through millions of people to get that simple answer back. So that ought to be one of the very first problems offered to the mass audience.
In today's discussions about schooling, frequently you hear going back to the basics. You hear discussions about going back to the basics. In your mind, what is going back to the basics?
There's an incredible ignorance in our society today, and that's why it can make so many bad decisions. But it happens then that at the present time, 99% of humanity do not understand science and technology. And the reason they don't is that science and technology use mathematical language that is non-experimentally evidenceable. And human beings, every child is a really good scientist and wants experimental evidence. And the scientist himself wants experimental evidence. So it is, historically, culture has made a great mistake of taking on mathematical tools that have no experimental evidence whatsoever. You say to the little child coming to school here, never mind your interest in the cosmos, never mind your interest, come in, you're going to get a 1, 2, and a 3. And we say, we're going to simplify this geometry. You're much too complicated, so we're going to do nice plain geometry. Give us experimental evidence of a surface without a substance under it. There's none. We actually develop such bad tools, such crude tools with science. Seems amazing to have to say, but they've learned to use these crude tools and to actually cope with the 4-dimensional world in 3 dimensions. That's why they had to have all kinds of imaginary numbers, very complicated mathematics, to make up for the fact they start with the idea of an Earth that is flat, perpendicular, parallel, and the universe is not operating, convergent, divergent. At any rate, we have then what's going to happen is that every one of those kids are going to begin to really learn directly how the universe is really working. We do have what are called synergetic mathematics, which is the coordinate system being used by nature, and it is conceptual all the way through, as is all life. It can be conceptual by tuning in and tuning out, but it always has models. It is always experimentally evidenceable. So we'll have a young world discovering that. Then the 99% who are now not properly educated will then be able to understand what's going on. What you talk about basics is then 99% who don't understand that all that science ever has found out is that the universe is the most incredible technology. We have the 99% today thinking that technology is only weapons or machinery to be exploited with. Therefore, they say, let's get back to basics, let's get out. They don't want this new. Don't realize what a beautiful phenomenon your own brain is, with over quadrillion atoms and most beautiful arrangements, which is incredible technology. Our technology of our whole body, our technology of our universe is so incredible that it is possible for you and I to be talking by satellite right this second. And what we're all going to learn is, culturally, in the very biggest way, is that you and I are not the telephone or the satellite that you and I are talking via, that we are something else altogether. We are entirely metaphysical. Physics